Hello everyone and welcome into Devil's Digest TV. I'm Adam Beadle, joined alongside Devil's Digest publisher Hoda Rubino. Coming after 2 weeks here of spring practice, we're going to dive into that, but we'd also like to give a big thank you to our sponsors, Burrito Express and Santan Ford, for always publishing our work over here at DevilsDigest.com. Well, Hod, 2 weeks through the spring, nice evening out here in Tempe, finally getting to see these guys in full pads. What have been your impressions so far?
Yeah, I think, Adam, when you look at once the full pads go on, you can really look at the physicality of this team and judge better the offensive line, defensive line, and the running game. And I think the physicality definitely increased as you would want it to be in full pads, even from just a few days ago when it was just shoulder pads. And I think that you're seeing a running game that is really starting to, I would say, execute what the coaches were talking about. Because we heard Kenny Dillingham, offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, wanting to go into that 20 personnel, into the 21 personnel more often than they did last year. They feel they have the depth to do that. And definitely some running backs, I think, that are jumping off the page in that sense. Today in specific, I would say Kyson Brown and David Abbott, the Villanova transfer, who not only is a physical running back, to me at least, I was really surprised with his abilities as a receiver out of the backfield. Maybe not something that he came in as a calling card, but I'm getting to see that more and more. So I think those two running backs tonight on Saturday really stood out. But I think also some other running backs like Carde Mack, the freshman, who definitely showed some flashes in Sun Bowl prep practices, I think is somebody that's going to be very, very hard to keep off the field. When I did an interview a few weeks ago with Marcus Arroyo, the offensive coordinator, he told me that he didn't think Carde Mack is going to redshirt. And so far, I think what we're seeing in spring practice is really standing true to that. The offensive line, I think you got a good mix of returning players, like Makai Stewart at left guard, and also some newcomers like the Georgia Tech center, Tane Alatuapalo. And if I'm butchering the name, he's new to all of us. But that's one player in specific that was really excited for the offensive line, because anybody that saw Georgia Tech run the ball the last 2 years definitely knows that if you're going to get an offensive lineman from the Yellow Jackets, it's going to be a quality player, and this player really has come as advertised. So I really think, from an offensive line perspective, they've really been able to open the holes in this first day of full pads, really do a good job in pass protection so far. So overall, I think from the physicality from the offensive side, I think you have to please with what you see so far.
You talked about the depth. Kenny said today that there's a lot of position battles going on offensively and defensively. What have you kind of made of some of those so far?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was going to talk about the quarterback battle. I mean, sure, Cutter Boley, the Kentucky transfer, is expected to be QB1 when the season does kick off. But I think that Mikey Keene, the local quarterback who played at both UCF, Fresno State, and Michigan, is somebody that is definitely giving him a lot of competition. And I think the way it's looking right now, Adam, that competition is really going to continue until the last day of spring. And I don't know if we're going to have a clear-cut starter at the end of spring, which is fine, because I don't think you need to have that in order to have a very good starter come August, September. But I do feel that the Cutter Boley, has done well. But I think Mikey Keene is definitely giving him a lot of run for his money, which I'm really not surprised about. Jake Fetty, the freshman quarterback. Definitely some flashes here and there, but also showing why he's a freshman at the end of the day. So I think, but that really hasn't been, out of the ordinary. But overall, I think the quarterback competition is something that everybody has their eye on. And again, something I think is really going to continue every day, every practice this spring, because I think that competition is far from over.
A lot of defensive newcomers as well. We see a lot of new faces in the secondary, Lyric Rawls, Ashton Stamps, and then of course you've got guys like Owen Long in the linebacker room. What have you kind of made of some of those newcomers on defense?
Yeah, I think, not that the newcomers are not crucial on offense, but they're definitely crucial that much more on defense. I mean, you really only have one returning starter, C.J. Fide, who due to injury has not even seen the field, at least not in team periods this spring. So it was very imperative that those newcomers hit the ground running. I'm very impressed with the two junior college defensive tackle transfers, Jeffrey Mans and Hiram Vaneo, playing really well. Deshaun Morgan really didn't flash at all as a freshman last year. As a redshirt freshman, I'm seeing a lot of positives from him. And when you have guys like C.J. Fide and Zach Swanson, who really can probably point to maybe the 2 probable starters for the season opener. Those guys are out of injuries, and the 3 players that I'm mentioning over here are just playing really, really well, taking advantage of each and every opportunity. Then you look at defensive end. I mean, I talked a lot about this, how very, very late in the transfer portal window, they landed 2 studs in Martin Winston and Jalen Thompson. Those guys are definitely shining, but my subscribers will remember that I mentioned a true freshman by the name of Julian Ugo, who coaches told me, look out for that freshman because he's going to start making some noise in the spring. And sure enough, Kenny Dillingham, literally just 15 minutes ago, does mention him in post-practice. So, good to see those newcomers, again, stepping up in a position that is very crucial. Owen Long at linebacker, I think, is everything that we thought he was going to be. So many parallels to Keyshawn Elliott, somebody who, as we know, led all FBS schools in tackles last year, and I'm really impressed with what I've seen from him. And obviously, when you play next to Martell Hughes, somebody who didn't maybe get that many snaps his freshman and sophomore year, but we always knew that potential is there. And now that he's a full-time starter, I think he's definitely showing, just the vast potential that he has. So I think the linebacker group is in good hands, even though they lost the 2 starters, Jordan Crook and Keyshawn Elliott, due to exhaustion of eligibility. You mentioned Lyric Walls, obviously, somebody who came in with a lot of hype, and I think is really justifying that. Maybe another safety that didn't come with that much hype is Josiah McGrew from FIU. Somebody, again, that I mentioned before spring practice. Look out for this guy. Somebody who played just 1 year at Division football at Florida International, put up great numbers, and he said, "The heck with that. I'm good to play in the Power 4." And he's proven so far, for being such a young player, somebody that's really, really is going to make his mark. And I think it's important for the safeties and the cornerbacks, for that matter, to play well, because I think the wide receiver depth, which you didn't mention earlier, just absolute studs across the board, all from the portal. Reed Harris, Omarion Miller, Raiden Vines-Bright. If everybody thought, what is life going to look like in the wide receiver room after Jordan Tyson, well, guys, you don't have to worry about it, because hard for me to see this group really regressing after what I've seen so far. Just a very, very capable arsenal of wide receivers. And you got a guy like Jaron Hamilton and Ryan Nelms, coming off the bench, so to speak. So the depth of wide receiver, I think, to me, is night and day from what it was last year. But going back to the secondary, I think Rodney Bimage and Kenny Dillingham talked about that a few minutes ago, is really taking that extra step, starting to maybe look more like a veteran and less like an underclassman. And Ashton Stamps from LSU, again, just another huge pickup for Arizona State. He's pretty much, I would say, the pencil starter across the field for Rodney Bimage. Really is playing well. So I like what I'm seeing from that secondary. And again, it's just great to see some newcomers, some young players really taking advantage of their opportunities so far in the spring.
Well, I was about to bring up that wide receiver room to you, but you already talked about it a little bit. It kind of wrapped this all up. It seems to get the vibe that ASU staff did another great job once again evaluating the new talent that they brought in.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, you can talk about Omarion Miller, okay, and that's a no-brainer, and that's a big feather in the cap for ASU, who all the coaches are going to tell you, don't pay the highest NL checks out there, but still able to get something like Omarion Miller, where everybody and their cousin was after, to get him over here. I think that's a huge testament of what Arizona State has to offer, which again is not the highest NIL, but having a great wide receivers coach in Hines Ward, which if you want to go to get to the NFL, that's the guy that you want to learn from. We had a great article on our network a few days ago called Sunday Chasers, Why Wide Receivers Are Drawn to Hines Ward. And it was really talking more about the 2027, 2028 wide receivers that are really impressed with what Hines Ward is offering them in the recruiting process. So now to see also this wide receiver group come in is a great testament to what ASU is building over here in terms of the wide receiver group. A guy like Reed Harris from Boston College, I don't think there were enough players chasing after him, but luckily for ASU, they're able to land him. I mean, absolute freak with his size and his agility for his size. That is something that even on Sundays you don't see often at all. And Raiden Vines-Bright, right now looks like he has that starting slot wide receiver starting role on lockdown. Somebody who played quite a bit at Washington. Now he's coming home. people may forget he just played about what 6 miles down the road over here
Yep.
at Tempe Coronel del Sol, and just another solid pickup, which again is just creating such a deep wide receiver room for these Sun Devils. So again, if anybody thinks that the passing game is going to take a step back in 2026 just because Jordan Tyson is not here anymore, you really have it wrong, because those 3 starting wide receivers and some of the reserves I mentioned a few minutes ago are really creating quite the area arsenal for the Sun Devils. I'm not saying this is going to be a pass first team, but I feel it's going to be maybe a more balanced team, and we're not going to see more focusing on one wide receiver like we saw last year, because again, the depth right now just really forces you in a very good way to act differently.
Absolutely. Well, 5 down, 10 more to go here in the spring for Arizona State. We will have plenty of coverage for you at DevilsDigest.com, as well as all of our other social media platforms. Again, a big thank you to our sponsors, Burrito Express and Santan Ford, for their continued support of our work at DevilsDigest.com. For Hode Rubino, I'm Adam Beadle, and we will continue to update you and the rest of Sun Devil Nation with news from Arizona State Spring throughout the next coming weeks.